case. Not too big so it'll easily fit on your dresser, and not too small so there's plenty of room for the whole collection. We found one at our favorite antique shop. I'll take you there, and then we'll come back and build our version of the jewelry case. That's next, right here on the new Yankee Workshop. Finally, I get into the basement of European Country Antiques. Now, you got to know Ed pretty well before you get down here. Oh, you got a pretty good collection.
Yeah, I just got these in. Up here is kind of the top of the line one.
Mm-hmm.
This is French. Probably was a spice rack.
Mm-hmm. Looks like there's an outline on the drawer front. It was painted on there.
Nice dovetailed drawers.
Mm-hmm.
Original paint.
Mm-hmm. Original hardware.
Yeah. Nice size.
What do you get for a piece like this?
This one would go for $425.
Ouch. That's a lot.
Well, on the other end, the spectrum, here we go. This is a reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
And this is modeled after a salesman's sample case.
So when the salesman went around the countryside, they didn't want to take a full-size piece of furniture, so they built a scale version.
And they could show what they could do.
So this is old wood, but it's a new piece.
This is old wood, new piece.
All right. And how much price difference between
Less than
the
half
two?
the cost of that one.
Okay.
But there's a couple of other ones.
What about this piece? What's going on with this piece?
You know, that's kind of an unusual piece. I don't know if it was originally veneered, because you can see really
the ends of the drawers.
Yeah.
Or maybe it might have just been a very utilitarian piece and somebody added this detail at the bottom to give it a more formal look.
Yeah, I brought it in. I like the proportion of it. I thought it would work in a lot of places. But this is another one I wanted to show you.
I like this one. I like these flush brass keyholes. Nice drawers, beautifully dovetailed.
This is what the English would call an upmarket piece.
Well, I think we'll take it, and we won't even ask the price.
Finally.
Well, after studying the antique original, I came up with a few modifications for our jewelry case. I made it a little bit shallower. It has a couple drawers, which we'll have for storage area. I'm still waiting for a couple more pulls for this bottom one. Up at the top, instead of a drawer, the lid actually opens, and after it's finished, I'll install a mirror right here. Now, here's a feature you don't want to tell everyone about, the hidden compartment. If you reach under the base, you can slide it out, and there's a tray for the most valuable pieces in the collection. I want to start today by working on the sides of the case. I took some 3/4 inch cherry and planed it down to 1/2 inch. I want to square them up and cut them to length. We'll do that at the table saw. Now, before we use any power tools, let's take a moment to talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. I've laid out for some dados on the side pieces. That's where the fixed shelves will go between the drawers. I've set up a 1/2 inch straight cutting bit and set the fence far enough away to make this first dado. Now, if you notice, I want to stop the dado. I don't want it to show through the front of the case. So I've put a line here on the fence that's back from the cutting edge about 1/4 inch. For this side, I'll just start in. When I get to that mark, I'll remove the piece. Okay, that takes care of one side. Now on the opposing side, the stop has to be on this edge, so I can't simply start in. I have to drop the piece over the bit 1/4 inch in front of it and then push it through. Now I'm going to move the fence over to do this dado along the bottom edge. For the dado that goes in the center, my fence doesn't go far enough back. So I've clamped the piece in my miter gauge, and I've put marks on the table this time to show me where to start and to stop. Now, using the same bit, splitting my fence so part of the bit goes under it, I formed a rabbet for the plywood back. For the last few minutes I've been setting up for the next step on the side pieces. Here you can see the layout. It's a slight taper coming up, which forms the front leg, a straight cut across, and then the back leg. Now this cut is difficult to make perfectly accurate at the bandsaw or by hand, and I want the two sides to match. So what I've done is set up a 1/4-inch spiral bit, which is great for making a plunge cut all the way through the wood, and because I'm going to be riding it against the fence, both pieces will come out exactly the same. Once again, I'll drop it down on a layout line at the fence, run it through, and remove it. Now for the flare of the legs, I will have to use my bandsaw. The next thing to do is to work on the shelves. And I've taken a scrap and made a sample notch that has to fit into that dado so that the shelf comes flush to the front edge. I've ganged the 3 shelves together, holding them with a couple spring clamps, and I'm just going to use my miter gauge to nibble away the material. Okay, now we're ready to put this part together, a little bit of glue in each of the dados. We'll drop the shelves in and clamp it together. I don't think I need any nails for this. The glue alone should do the job. Here I'm marking a piece of 1/2-inch cherry that goes at the back of our jewelry case. And if you look at the prototype, you can see that it's rabbited to fit around the side. I'll do that at the table saw. Now that's the first of 2 cuts for a wide rabbet where the backing plywood will go. Okay, now that piece gets glued, slipped right into that rabbet, and clamped. Now I'm ready to start working on this base, and each piece has a little bit of a cove at the top edge. That's next. Here I'm beginning to miter those pieces of base. And the reason I'm using the table saw rather than miter box is that my miter box doesn't have enough capacity for this height. Okay, now that's the fit that I'm looking for. These corners will be reinforced with a biscuit, but before I do that, I want to make these decorative cutouts. Well, now I'm going to turn to my oscillating spindle sander to smooth out any roughness left by the bandsaw. There's a whole series of different spindles that I can put in, and what I try to do is match it closest to the diameter that I'm working with. Now using a piece of self-adhering sandpaper on a little block of wood, I can get into the little corners that the drum doesn't hit. The base trim and the tray ride on a little wooden strip. I need a dado in the trim for that. Here I've set up my dado a little wider than 1/4 inch, and I'll run the pieces through. Well, here's my plate joiner. It doesn't quite look right because I've flipped it upside down and clamped it to my workbench. I've tipped the fence to 45 degrees so that the miter cut on the base fits snugly against the cutting edge. Now I can make slots for number 0 biscuits. With some glue in the slots and on the miter, I can slip the pieces together, and then I'll clamp them, set it aside to dry. This spacer will help keep everything square. We'll set this aside to dry and build the tray. Let's look at the prototype again. The tray is made up of some 1/2 inch by 1 inch cherry, and the corner joint is just a rabbet joint. We'll make those at the table saw. I've set up the dado with a 1/2 inch width now, installed a sacrificial strip because I'm right up against the end, and I'm going to run the long pieces through. That little rabbet, which is in the bottom edge of the pieces, will receive the plywood so that it's flush. Okay, a little glue on those rabbet joints at the corner, and I'll attach it with a 5/8 inch brad. Now you notice that I've held the brad quite a distance in from the edge because I have to leave room for the groove, which is going to go in here later. With the dado set a little wider than 1/4 inch, I've made a groove in the tray, and once again that's going to receive this guide strip just like the base. The strips that the tray and the base ride on need a notch at each end. To lock them in place, a dab of glue in the middle of that cutout in the side, and I'll lock it in place with a couple brads. Let's see how everything fits. First I'll slide the tray in. That rides okay. Now I'll take the base assembly, which I took out of the clamps and sanded the corners, slide that in, and that fits okay. And it seems nice and straight. So now I'll just pull it out a couple inches, make sure that the tray is centered, and put a couple pencil marks to locate where I want to nail it on. Let's take a look at the prototype again. If you look at the underside, you can see there's a block on each end, and that holds the base to the tray and keeps it tight to the side of the case. I need to pre-drill the holes for the screws first. Now I'm making a small countersink for the head of the screw in each. Now I'll attach the block first to the bottom of the tray. Pre-drill a little hole. I'm using a hand screwdriver here because I don't want to risk splitting the tray. Now one into the base. Okay, that works pretty well. A little bit of lube on those slides and it'll work a little more easily. The next thing I want to do is install this top piece right here. It's meant to give the illusion of a draw. So I cut it a little bit narrower to leave a space at the bottom, but to leave a space at the sides or the ends, I just want to make a shallow rabbet. Okay, a little sanding just to round over the edges all the way around. Let's see how that's going to look. Now if I hold it up off the bottom just a little bit, there'll be a space at the top, and that curve gives me the space on the ends. Now I'll just glue it in place. Well, I'd say that's enough for today. We'll easily finish this project tomorrow. I got started this morning working on the drawers for the jewelry case. The first step is to make a groove in all the side pieces for the 1/4 inch plywood bottom. That's good. Now I've installed my dado cutter and set it up for 3/8 of an inch thickness, which is the thickness of the back, plowed out a dado to receive the back of the drawer. Now I'm ready to make some half-blind dovetails to join the drawer sides to the drawer fronts. So I've brought out my dovetailing jig. This jig has adjustable fingers, so I can get just about any kind of dovetail layout that I want. I also take advantage of the fact that I can use both ends of the jig. On this end, I've set up the wide drawer, and over on the other end, I've set up the narrow drawer. I always put the piece with the inside facing out, and I like to install this sacrificial strip, and that prevents any tear out as I machine the dovetails. The other key to the jig is this collar that's on the router and the bit itself. The collar rides around these fingers, forming perfect dovetails every time. Now let's get ready to cut the pins in the drawer fronts. So first I remove the side pieces. Now I'm going to put in this piece of 1/2-inch plywood, slip it up so that it just catches the bottom edge of the sacrificial strip, and tighten that in place. Now I remove the strip. Now I can install the drawer fronts at the top of the jig, the inside facing up, the wide one on this side, the narrow one on the other end. Now I'll flip the guide fingers over and set the scale to the thickness of the side pieces, which is 3/8 of an inch. Now I drop the jig down tightly on top of the drawer fronts, and I'm ready to route the pins. All right, see how we did. That's nice. Now we can glue them up. Not only is that a strong joint, but it's also beautiful. Okay, the back is next. Fits into those dados and secured with a few brads. Okay, now I just slip the bottom in, no glue, just lay it in dry, and nail it into the back. When I slide the completed drawer into the case, you can see that it's tight where it meets the shelf. In order to get a gap along the bottom edge, just like I have at this top, I'm going to make a shallow rabbet. You can see that I've slid the fence over so that the saw blade will take just a little bit off the front edge, yet it allows the drawer to still ride on the rest of the side. And that's how that's done. Now, one more thing I want to do before I put the lid on is to make a little cutout at the back here so that if it's sitting on a high dresser, I won't see it. The top is a piece of 1/2-inch cherry, and I'm using a large radius roundover bit, but just the very tip to put this decorative detail on the ends and the front edge. This piano hinge is especially made for jewelry cases. It rests back at 95 degrees so that when we have the mirror here, it'll be easy to see. Being sure to use my push stick when passing small stock through the dado, I've just made a cut in the middle of this piece. Next, I'm going to switch to a saw blade, split it in half, and the result will be some moldings that I'll use to hold the mirror to the lid. For years, we've struggled trying to get a nice finish on our cherry projects. Whenever we've used an oil-based stain, it tends to look a bit blotchy. And someone recommended that we use a product like this, a gel stain. This is actually a gel stain with an oil. Now, the gel stain tends to unify the grain and the color of the wood, giving us a nice even look, and it offers plenty of protection. Now I put it on with the foam brush, spread it out until I have a nice even coat, and then I let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes. All right, well, it's been about 10 minutes. Just take a rag and lightly wipe off the excess. You can see how nice and even that is. Now you can repeat this process in a couple hours, and what you end up with is a nice hand-rubbed look. But we like to take it one step further, and that's to coat everything with gloss polyurethane, several coats of gloss polyurethane. If you look at this desktop writing case that we did a few weeks ago, that's an example of what it looks like with 3 or 4 coats. And as you can see, the cherry looks beautiful. With the urethane applied over the stain, I can now finish up the jewelry case. I'm going to slide this mirror in. I've taken the small strips that I made and attached them to the top with some screws. It's a piece of 1/8 inch mirror. And the only place I'm going to use any glue is right on the miters. Okay, there's that. All right, now to really finish this off, let's line the drawers with felt. Here you start to see the effect of the felt lining. It gives a nice soft interior to the compartment. Now I picked this material up from my woodworking supplier. It's adhesive-backed felt, self-sticking. You just peel off the release paper. After you cut it to size, just very carefully set it in place and press it down. Well, here it is with all the felt installed and the knobs. It was a fun project and fairly inexpensive, but filling it, that's going to be another matter.